I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the third identity law video. Yes, it's that guy. Emil Sinclair was one of the youngest of the damned dozen, if not the youngest. Armed with a halberd, he was born into a well-off family in the nest of District 11, who was thrown into a world of violence to which he wasn't born into. A punching bag, both physical and emotional. A weak-willed wreck who can be dangerous if pushed too far, although he's usually at the back during battles, lacking the courage to fight directly unless ordered to do so. He will be the subject of this identity law video. Let's go over the backstory of Emil Sinclair. As previously stated, he was born into a well-off family in the nest of District 11, the domain of K-Corps, a wing that deals in the singularity of HP bullets that give those that are shot by them a temporary healing factor. His family owned a factory that dealt in prosthetics, which are cybernetic bodies and also body parts that some used, like Moses, the distortion detective. The bodies, on the other hand, are those that replaced their bodies with prosthetics. They did so they didn't have to worry about sleep, eating, drinking, or even pain. His parents were those that replaced their bodies with prosthetics, as did his older sister when she graduated. He was expected to do the same when he graduated. Then he did something incredibly foolish that changed his life. Yes, changed his life, and not for the better. One day he was talking with his classmates in school, and he let slip confidential info that his family had signed a contract with P-Corps to impress them. One of them certainly did. It was Chroma, one who was basically an infiltrator of the Hammer and Nail, the psychotic anti-prosthetic branch of N-Corps, who used him to gain access to what was underneath the basement of his family's mansion. He was too much of a coward to say no, or even back away when he had the chance. Then one day, on Christmas Eve, she, Guido, and other Inquisitors visited his mansion and murdered his family. She decided to let him live, as killing him would be an act of mercy. She wanted him to be tormented until the day that he joins them. That he was carried by Guido and dumped in some alley somewhere away from that mansion, and was eventually found by Faust. Yeah, that's right. Virgilius wasn't the only one with PTSD flashbacks relating to December 24th. Demian was likely watching over him as well, as after he met him in school, and then in the alley after his parents and older sister were dead. Well, thankfully, Emil Sinclair doesn't travel around the city and do a lot of training and learning, as that would sound too much like a Batman origin story. Now, if you think that his backstory is up, you should see what some of the identities are like. First we have Blade lineage Saosu, Emil Sinclair. Saosu being Korean for watering. And his story begins with him sitting on a rooftop on a building within the back streets in a district where it has an East Asian style. It could be District 10 or it could be somewhere completely different. Sinclair contemplated which side was the real him. He feared himself. He had no control over his own shifts. He lacked the courage to decide for himself. He was thinking, what if I really was just a crazed murderer? These thoughts befuddled and clouded his head. Those among the Blade lineage praised his tendencies as the mentality of a true slayer. He didn't care about such compliments, as they didn't do him any good, as he didn't want to be like that. Rather than inspire confidence, they only served to burden him. He still struggles to find his place between the pleasure of bloodshed and the unease that it made him feel. He noted that the moon was so bright that night. He gazed at the moon in solitude, the one thing that could bring comfort to him. In this reality, instead of being found by Faust, he was found by the Blade lineage. It's likely that he had at least one scar on him before he disclosed the confidential information at school, because that syndicate considers those with unscarred bodies as cowards. If they're feeling particularly merciful, they'll just send them away. If they're not, they'll just kill the insolent one. Unless they give prospective initiates who seek to join their ranks a way to prove themselves worthy, such as deliberately scarring themselves, proving that they aren't cowards. In some painful and messy initiation rites. Regardless, the Blade lineage, whether it be on purpose or as a byproduct, encouraged his more violent tendencies, to the point where it seems like he has a split personality. This has happened in the main universe when Sinclair's PTSD affected him and Chroma pushed him too far. He stopped being a coward and became a berserker that made Heathcliff look calm and rational, and he's Anger Issues Monthly's Mr. March. This is more frequent in this reality, as he's encouraged to be violent towards those that are the enemy. They also don't know about his trauma. Well, they either don't know or they do, and they just don't care to help him treat it. He certainly feels conflicted between his hesitance to being a killing machine and deriving pleasure from doing so, to the point where he'd likely get on with the main version of Ryosho. The Ryosho of that reality, however, that's for another time, as that will be covered when we eventually get to her identity lore video. Next we have Zwei Association South Section 6, Emil Sinclair. He was observing someone with a jacket that says VIP with Don Quixote, telling her compatriots that this one was his. Sinclair telling her to be quiet, thanking her for the milk tea. It was revealed that this was an entrance exam for the Zwei Association. This was taken after introductory training. He was tasked with a simplified request to see if he was fit to work for that association. Don Quixote was asking if that was the important person that they needed to guard. And then he remembered that the Hana Association, although they're in charge of managing the grades and licenses of fixers, not every exam is under their direct jurisdiction. Each association has its tests and reports their results back to the Hana Association. In this case, he saw the client, the protectee, being caught up in a fight. Sinclair was wavering. Don Quixote reminded him to watch and sit idly is against the Zwei's creed. He remembered his qualification test and replied that they're the Zwei, their client's shield. In this reality, it likely diverged after he found himself in the alley, where he decided that he wanted to make something of his life, to protect those that he failed to do so previously. So he decided to join the Zwei Association, a fixer association that specializes in peacekeeping, defending their clients from those that would threaten them. It'd be like if Bruce Wayne lost everything: his home, his fortune, his company, and decided to join the GCPD to fight the criminals that took so many lives, including his parents. As for his weapon in that reality, it was a mace. It's quite a deviation from the usual Zwei equipment, as in Library of Ruina, all of the fixers in Zwei South Section 6 had Zweihanders, the kind of sword that can be overpowered in games that come from Software's Hateful Masochist range. Well, the games in that have that weapon. Perhaps he sees a Zweihander as too slow for his combat style. As for Don Quixote, she was not only with Zwei South Section 6, but she was assessing him, which isn't a complete inconsistency on her part. There is... well, it's certainly a reality where he was going to be better than he was in the main version, where he was rebuilding his life after the hammer and nail ruined his, with him being an unknowing pawn of theirs. Now we have Los Mariachis, Jeffy! Emil Sinclair. And his story involves a novato, or rookie, asking someone if they wanted them to do that. With some hesitation, his eyes quivered, his skin went pale, and his well-furbished moustache wriggles like a caterpillar. The alligator, cheerful, noted that the Jeffy was feeling uneasy. It's all up to the novato to cheer him up. Sinclair slowly confronted him. All the others had eyes on him. He was holding his maracas with trembling hands. The vivas, the vivacious, told the novato that this was a rite in passage. The alligator told him that all true purveyors of joy ought to experience to be the verdadero mariachi. This made the Novato's face so pale that it was looking like a shade of lead. The Novato heard the stories and didn't want to say this to Sinclair directly. There's a good reason for that. Because Sinclair was their jefe. The Alguere agreed that this would be a bad idea, as his head would go pop if he did that. The Vivaz agreed, "Un cráneo explosivo!" Sinclair said, "What did I just say?" The others shook their heads and said the same thing. We all went for it once. The Novato let out a long sigh after that. Then he spoke to the boss, choosing his words carefully, saying to the boss, "Prepare the panada party," and before he could finish, Sinclair's maracas glowed and he had a skull mask revealed as he swung the maracas, making blood go out of them. Specifically out of the Novato's head. The Alguere saying, "Bien hecho, Novato. Bien hecho." Well, indeed. The Vivas noting that the boss has entered boss mode. The others scratched themselves on their backs and their heads so they watched the fainted Novato with proud eyes. This reminded them of their own experiences. In Chapter 2, Los Mariachis tried to recruit Emil Sinclair due to his repressed emotions, resulting in his dance stirring their emotions due to the wrist rocking, his pensive expression, restrained rhythm. Yes, a restrained rhythm. That and the rest, all coming from repressed darkness and inner turmoil. They saw this potential to grow big, and attempted to offer him a place among them. While in this reality, he ended up in District 10 and was somehow found by the mariachis, who saw a similar amount of potential and, in this case, recruited him. Yes, they were likely similarly impressed with his Cuban Pete routine, if it was the mask as it was in the source material, where the mask itself turns the wearer more violent and more excessive in how they dealt with things. Okay, going off topic. They recruited him into their syndicate, although he had a similar problem as the Blade lineage identity. An almost split personality. His was channeled into dance, while dealing blunt force trauma with his specially made maracas. This is why he became the boss instead of Aida in that reality. Hard to know how well he would fare against the damned dozen of that reality. Perhaps Aida would be among them. Es hora de aplastar algunos cráneos. Yeah, I know. I still struggle with English, so I don't know why I'm bothering doing that. Finally, we have the one who shall grip. And this identity story starts with the one who grips, Faust, telling Emil Sinclair to look that way. She spoke in a soft and gentle voice that felt like it was rapping, perhaps coiling. She laughed psychotically, asking if it was a magnificent sight. It felt like it was twisting the air, or like two sharp pieces of metal scraping together. One of these pieces of metal read Emil, the key that she got from him. The building was in flames. She asked him how it felt to witness such a blaze. Such a sight. This was spoken in a manic voice, which she spoke with a twisted smirk, more so than the fire around them. Sinclair hesitated, fear making it harder to speak, or at least it seemed that way. He could have found his own strength and took control over his own life. Yet, that's what didn't happen. He saw it as beautiful, like those vile and repulsive things that were being purged. He rejected the ease of letting another crack the egg from the outside. But it wasn't easy. The flame resulted in him giving up his mental strength. What little he had, anyway. And he asked, why didn't he let go earlier? Why think or ponder so much when there was a clear answer right in front of them? He was trembling and on the verge of tears. He was pushed out of his nest too soon, feigning the confidence he lacked. A baby bird that hasn't broken his shell fully. That described him. Faust told him that not everyone can be like Faust, but it's alright. Then she pointed to the sky where a prosthetic user was being skewered to a nail. This hit him psychologically, more so than it would usually. Yes. He witnessed something painful to him, but he chose to be ignorant of it. He knew that this wasn't right. This wasn't right at all, but he chose to do nothing about it, letting Faust feed him, metaphorically diving into the pot of boiling oil before being reduced to ash. By the time the heating flames, or whatever you want to call them, the flames that were turning the mansion into a burnt out husk. And not to mention the metaphorical boiling oil, he'd be reduced to ash. Who he was destroyed. This broke Sinclair's mind completely. Faust congratulating him at laughing at this sight. Outwardly celebrating this, but it was her own achievement that she was lauding. Him laughing about as madly as her at this sight told her that she was moulding him into a form one of these worlds would envy. Someone from another world already was infatuated by a glimpse of the changing and charring child. Soon, the world would face a storm of fire, oil, and sparks, where Sinclair would face a similar yet distinct trial. Faust then beckoned Sinclair. The cleansing of the world shall begin. He wept, but he was snuffed out in flame. He swung the steam, or rather the steel, in his two arms, unable to grip anything in his hands. Anything else, rather. unable to tread the path he chose. It was unclear that, well, where he was able to break the shell from the inside or yield to the ease of being gripped upon. What happened in that world would stay there. But that which would reach that point first, who can ever know? The divergence point in this case was when the one who grips was killing Emil Sinclair's parents. Well, seeing as she's Faust in that reality, she's actually more competent than Chroma was. She knows how to better manipulate Emil Sinclair and break his mind to her liking. Where unlike Chroma, she went all out and burned the mansion early on, while also killing his family. Her approach was more successful than Chroma's was. As for her seeing alternate timelines, she was likely aware of Chroma viewing this reality, encouraging her to see this as Sinclair's destiny. This is basically a version of the Joker breaking Dr. Harleen Quinzel's mind to turn her into Harley Quinn, except gender bent, where one breaks the mind of the other to bring them over to their twisted cause. As the one who shall grip, well, he's quite different to the others that are part of the Hammer and Nail, as he's also a pyromaniac, and not in the controlled way that the Leo Association are, but in the way that wears at his mind, to the point where if he does it too often, he loses what little control over himself he has left. It's a miracle he didn't distort. Each of these variants has faced similar trauma to each other, one deciding to make something of his life and join the Zwei Association, becoming a better person than he was previously. One was taken over by the bloodlust that would rival that of the main Ryushu, as if he had a split personality. One became the boss of a jovial syndicate that saw gambling as entertainment, and sees the expression of one's passion being through dance, which Sinclair knew well. Then there was one that showed what Chroma wanted Sinclair to become. But since she lacked the intelligence that Faust had, she wasn't successful. It makes you wonder, where did N-Corp Faust and Chroma gain the ability to see alternate timelines? Specifically, versions of the future. Was it due to the glass window technology? Or some variation of it? Or was it due to a similar ability to that of the Purple Tear? That was a part of them. Did it drive them insane, or were they like that before they gained that ability? The variants of Sinclair found different causes to follow, some less just than others, and not just because two of them are organized crime, although N-Corp is definitely the worst of them, due to the pure insanity that only the Ring can rival. And that's based on what the glass window did to those exposed to too much of it. In most cases, they distorted. Then there's them letting the Hammer and Nail hunt down those that use prosthetics, having the core mentality that everything different is wrong. The more I learn about N-Corp, the more I'm convinced of how up it is, and how they're one of the few factions in that universe which I could confidently call pure evil. And that is saying a lot in a grimdark setting like this, where morality is harder to define and often blurry. You really need to think about it with a lot of these. Not so with Encore. It'll be a wait before I do the next one, as I'll need to go through Chapter 4 next. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!